for joining us for this conversation today. This is the next webinar in our Leave No One Behind webinar series, and specifically focusing on the mutual accountability mechanism and preparing for the upcoming sector ministers meeting. Virginia, I think you have control over the presentation. Do you mind advancing a couple slides? That's great. Thank you. You can leave it there for just a moment. So the way this conversation will work today, again, my name is Marissa. I am part of the SWA Secretariat, the country engagement team that works directly with SWA country partners. And for the webinar this evening, my colleague Virginia Rolfe, who has been heavily engaged in the rollout of the mutual accountability mechanism, will just present on what the mechanism is and how it fits into the SWA framework, and several other specifics on the mechanism. And then we have specific presentations from colleagues in Pakistan and Vietnam. As I mentioned, we certainly will be glad to take any of your questions in the chat, and then when we get to a moment where we can take those questions and address them to the presenters, we'll most certainly do that. Put your name in the chat, please do so. Let us know where you're joining from, as well as if there's anyone joining with you. And just one last thought also, in the earlier webinar we had today, we had some questions that were a little bit more general related to the sector ministers meeting. We'll certainly save time for any of those questions that are a bit more general or logistical in nature, and we can discuss those at the very end. So with that, Virginia, I think I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you very much, Marissa. Good morning, everybody. Just to recap a little bit what I will be presenting today. I think many of you have already heard presentations on the mutual accountability mechanism. I will be going over the bare bones of what the mutual accountability mechanism is, and then we're very fortunate to have two countries that are then going to explain how they've been implementing the mutual accountability mechanism, which brings the whole process to life, takes it from being theory to being something very solid, and that I think that really helps us to understand what the mutual accountability mechanism can do for us as the SWA partnership, and how we're going to be using the mutual accountability mechanism at the sector ministers meeting in Costa Rica in April. So let me just give a quick recap of what this is, and then I can hand over to the more interesting presentations, perhaps from Pakistan and Vietnam, showing how it's being used. So very briefly, the mutual accountability mechanism is embedded within the SWA framework. You should be familiar with this slide at this point. It shows the guiding principles, the collaborative behaviors, and the building blocks. And the mutual accountability mechanism is very much embedded within that SWA framework. As you can see from this slide, transparency and accountability is one of the guiding principles, and it's also one of the collaborative behaviors, which is use one information and mutual accountability platform. It's very much reliant on collective and multi-stakeholder action, and maybe most importantly, it brings the opportunity of a global sharing of priorities and ideas. It brings national priorities to global notice. And beyond that, it also is very much tied together with the SDGs. The SDGs do require multi-stakeholder collective action, they also require accountability. And that's the main reason why we've put together the mutual accountability mechanism. So what is it? What is this mutual accountability mechanism compared to what we had previously in the commitments process? It's very much building on what happened previously with SWA at the high-level meetings with the commitments process, and many of you will have remembered that and have experience of that. The last time we had commitments made was 2014 at the end of the MDG period, and it's taken us a couple of years to think through and to plan how we should be reacting to the SDGs. The main difference with the new, or the main differences, I should say, and the main areas that we've updated are that this new commitments process, this new mutual accountability mechanism, very much focuses on multi-stakeholder involvement. So previously, the commitments process was really only followed by countries and by a few development partners at the global level. With this process, we're actually asking all partners to consider making commitments and to hold what they're doing, to hold themselves and other people for what they're doing to account at the global level. However, having said it's at the global level, this mutual accountability mechanism is very much embedded in the national planning and review cycles. So commitments are made at the country level through those multi-stakeholder processes that may be happening at the national level, national planning and review meetings. I know some countries will have what is known as a joint sector review, but I think that is terminology that's used more in Africa than it is in Asia. But I know that there are equivalent processes where there are multi-stakeholder platforms for all partners to come together and share their experiences. And we'll definitely be hearing about that from our partners, Pakistan and Vietnam, later. The multi-stakeholder process is critical to this, and the commitments are drawn directly from national targets and milestones, or alternatively from regional commitments. For example, last week, some of us, even those from Asia, were at AfricaSan, and will have experienced something about the war commitments, which are made at the regional level. And this mutual accountability mechanism also allows countries to take those regional commitments, perhaps from SACOSAN, alternatively, and bring them to the global level. As I've already said, it's very important that all of our work at national level is also reflecting the SDGs, and so it could well be that commitments will be made directly related to realizing the SDGs. Just very briefly on how commitments are created. They may be tied in with the 3 or 5 year plans that national governments have for their own planning cycles. Governments should choose 2 or 3 country level commitments that they want to make at a global level. And very critical is that they also provide a timeline, a target date for achieving the commitments. And then beyond that, each constituency or partner can that is not a government, that is not the country partner, can contribute commitments that are relevant to the government commitment. Multinational partners join in making a national commitment, and so where, for example, partners such as UNICEF have a national office, they can make a commitment that reflects the government commitment in country. But we're also hoping that our multinational partners will also make a global commitment that is perhaps reflect some of the commitments that are being made at the national level. So making commitments, how do we do that? I just want to go through one example here, which illustrates how the different partners can work together to create commitments that build on and support government commitments. So in the example that I'm providing here, and it occurs to me that many people have seen this before, maybe I need to provide a new example so that we're not always looking at the same one. This example is of where the national government has decided, together in a multi-stakeholder process, that a critical area that will support achieving the SDGs is to create a rural sanitation strategy that targets the poorest districts. So that can be the overarching national government commitment, will be to develop a rural sanitation strategy that targets particular districts by a target date. There is then the opportunity for external support agency commitments to align their funding and priorities to supporting that strategy, and perhaps to target their financing to those districts that have been identified by the government. The CSOs in country may then identify approaches that will improve sanitation in those areas, and particularly may help in identifying which are the poorest areas, or may work in identifying which partners can be would be prepared and willing to support government in those targeted areas. The research and learning institutions may want to support the government by researching other sanitation strategies from other governments, from other countries, or make some other relevant research or monitoring processes available. And then the private sector may make a commitment to engage with all stakeholders in outlining, in clarifying their own role, and looking at developing and delivering the rural sanitation strategies through the advantages that they have as a private sector. So that's one example of what a national government commitment might look like, and how the other constituencies, the other stakeholders working in a particular country can support that government commitment. At this sector ministers meeting that we're just preparing for at the moment in Costa Rica, the main theme is leave no one behind. We have chosen that theme because it is the UN theme for 2019. It is the UN focus for the high-level political forum that takes place in July. And so what we're looking for at this particular sector ministers meeting is for at least one or two of the commitments that each government is making to focus on leave no one behind. Now, that's a very broad area of work, as we know. People can be left behind for many reasons, including poverty, gender, ethnicity, age, disability, and geographical area. So there are many different areas that could be seen to be supporting a policy of leave no one behind. And we would very much like to see governments making commitments that focus on that particular issue. So just to look very briefly at the sectors ministers meeting, the global high-level meetings of SWA is an opportunity to present the commitments. At this point, obviously, this is the first chance we are having of bringing commitments to the sector ministers meeting. We will just be presenting commitments. We will not obviously be reviewing them, but that will be a function of the sector ministers meetings, the high-level meetings in the future, that the meetings will be a chance to present and report back on previous commitments. We would like to see, as I've already said, the multinational partners making global commitments as well as their national commitments. Just to let you know how the mutual accountability mechanism will be presented at the sector ministers meeting. There is one plenary session on the mutual accountability mechanism where we will be hearing directly from countries and partners on how they're implementing the mutual accountability mechanism and the challenges and the opportunities. Going a little bit into some of the issues that we're going to be hearing about from Pakistan and Vietnam today. But there will also be screens available where you will be able to see what commitments are being made by other countries and partners. We think it is very important to be public about the commitments and to make sure that they are available for everyone to see it. And then there is the opportunity, obviously, to look and share experiences with other countries and partners that are making similar commitments to the ones that you're making, and we can certainly facilitate those conversations. So just before I pass over to Pakistan and to Vietnam, just as a moment of clarity on what the pioneer countries are and who they are and what they're doing. Some of you will be aware that there are what we've been calling pioneer countries, which is 10 countries from the SWA partnership, who are helping us to learn from the experience of implementing the mutual accountability mechanism. And we are following them, asking them to provide us with their experience, sharing their challenges, learning from the opportunities that they are getting from implementing this mutual accountability mechanism in order to help other countries carry out the work as well. The pioneer countries have been working since November on this, and we're very excited by the progress that's been made. I want to stress, however, that other non-pioneer countries have already also started making commitments, and that we expect all countries to make commitments at the sector ministers meeting. And as I say, we're very pleased to be able to announce that, and I think Cambodia is on the line. Cambodia has already made some commitments, and maybe we could hear about that as well later today. Just very briefly to let you know the information that we will be expecting to be receiving from countries and partners. We are in the process of creating a commitments template. There is already a template in the country brief, and that's fine if that's what you're providing. But we may be looking for a little bit of extra detail, and that will be this provided by this commitments template, which will be available as an online form as well as an offline form. We'll be looking at obviously the country name, the constituency and the institution making the commitment, an outline of what the commitment is. So we'll be looking at 2 or 3 per country, and preferably not too many more, because they become very difficult to report on if there are too many, and we don't want to go into too much. We want countries and partners to be making their top level commitments, and so keeping it to a limited number. We will want to know, was the commitment made through a participatory process that includes other constituencies other than government? We would like to know something very briefly about indicators. How will this be reviewed, and what are the source documents that you will be using? And for those partners that are not governments that are making commitments, we would like to know, is there a link to the government commitment? You may be making a commitment that is not linked to the government commitment. That's also fine. But if it is linked, then we would like to know that as much as anything, to link it in our database, so that when you're scrolling through commitments that are being presented at the sector ministers meeting, you can see which constituencies have aligned with those, with the government commitments. I think that's it for me for now, Marissa. I think it's probably best if we save questions for later, but if there are any burning questions, I can answer them now.
Thank you so much, Virginia. Satali, do you see any burning questions in the chat that we should address, or can we hold off and move on to Dr. Sama?
So far, there are no questions.
Okay.
The only ones were about there were requests for us to share the presentation. Maybe just to remind
Okay.
people, if you have a question, please put it in the chat or just start typing, and then we'll know. And I'll let you know, Marisa, about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then one other housekeeping note before we move on to Dr. Saima. Many people have joined us since the webinar began. Welcome. We ask that if you would please put your name in the chat and where you are joining us from, as well as if there's anyone else with you for this webinar. We'd greatly appreciate it. Dr. Saima, are you ready to go into your presentation? Dr. Saima, you might need to unmute.
Hello, good morning, Marisa, Virginia, and Sitali. I'm on the presentation. We can proceed.
Excellent, thank you. Sitali, could I maybe ask that you help advance the slides, and Dr. Saima, you could just let us know when you want us to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I can move the slides. Just tell me.
Yeah, Sitali, thank you. So thank you, the organizer of this SWA webinar series for providing us another opportunity to present to the participants who have all joined in for this webinar. Moving forward to the presentation, I would suggest, Sitali, can you move to the first slide? Thank you. Just before starting off with the presentation, I just want to give a brief overview of the country so that it gives better understanding to all the participants how big geographically we are, and in terms of population, and what is the current situation presently in Pakistan around water sanitation sectors, and some of the brief demographic population statistics. So the country population is around 207 million people, which makes it the 6th largest country in the world. Our urban and rural population breakdown is, as you can see on the slide, that 60.8% is the rural population and 39.2% are the urban population. And geographically, it has 4 provinces, including AJK and GB, Gilgit-Baltistan. So there are 4 provinces and 2 regions that are part of the geographic coverage of the country. So wash sector is devolved subject in Pakistan. We have a federal government and then the provincial governments. So the federal government has the responsibility and rules around the coordination of wash sector for the policy guidance and the technical support to the provinces, whereas provinces are the lead as far as the implementation is concerned. So in the provinces, Public Health Engineering Department and local government are the lead departments that take up the implementation of water sanitation and hygiene services and facilities. As far as the statistics around access and coverage of water and sanitation are concerned, 88% of the population has limited access to the services of water, and 64% have access to basic services for sanitation, whereas there are 22 million open defecators in the country. Now moving towards the roadmap and multi-stakeholder process, which we have adopted for mutual accountability. That includes, we initially have developed a conceptual framework that in order to organize that how we are going to engage international, regional, national, and subnational engagement of the partners. We organize for provincial JSRs and washback, and SDG baseline was established, and provincial SDG targets are also established. We utilized SDG costing tool. This was a consultative process which was organized in each of the province. Then we formulate. Then there are wash sector master plans which are developed in all the provinces in Sindh, Balochistan, Punjab, and KP. Then those provincial GSRs, which I have already shared in the previous point, they were concluded as a national GSR, concluded as a national GSR process. So a national SDG baseline has been established, and national SDG target are already established for Pakistan. And SDG 6 costing at national level is also finalized. Then with this new government, we have now the political vision to take WASH sector, the political vision that how we are moving forward in the WASH sector in next 5 years. So it is the Prime Ministers of Pakistan's commitment for Clean Green Pakistan movement, which I will explain in coming slides. Then there are national government commitments, which are now you can see that these are the national government commitments are not only the national government commitments; they are actually evolving from the provinces, and the targets and commitments are the homegrown Pakistan targets and commitments. And then we have involved all the constituencies to make their own commitments and align them with the commitments which government is making. Now, moving forward to the first point in this slide, the conceptual framework. I would like to request Kamran Naeem to explain the developing concept for enabling environment in Pakistan. So Kamran will explain this slide, and I will move forward after this slide from fifth onward. Sitali, can you move to fourth slide? Hello.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
You can hear
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Saima, for handing over. I'll explain this slide that once we were conceptualizing the concept of enabling environment in Pakistan, we thought that it has to be around financing cycle in Pakistan, which is budgeting and budget preparation cycle in Pakistan. So as any other country, Pakistan budget preparatory cycle starts in June. And then in the start of the budget cycle, if you want to influence the budget, you have to basically start influencing it from the right from the beginning, once the budgets are being prepared. So our conceptual framework aligned the national, international, and regional forums and commitments, and the commitments that we make with this budgetary cycle. Now, if you see in the diagram, the bigger budget cycle, we decided to do joint sector review, which comes in at the provincial joint sector reviews using WASH-BAT in December. So if you see on the right side, you can see that we wanted to do all the sector studies, surveys, for example, mix, and the sector delivery assessments, and all other studies before this provincial joint sector reviews. We wanted that the participants of the joint sector reviews, they become informed participants so that we can have a healthy discussion, use the WASH-BAT for deep analysis of 5 building blocks, and then we move on to the next item in the circle, which is the provincial commitments. And for announcement of provincial commitments, we engage the senior political leadership, for example, the chief ministers or public health engineering ministers, to come and announce the provincial commitments after the provincial joint sector reviews have been conducted. And these commitments are not like arbitrary commitments or statements which are political statements. These would be after a thorough analysis of the 5 building blocks using WASH-BAT. And then we also follow advocacy and communication plan from December to February to influence the budget cycle. So by the time the start of the budget cycle and the preparation is happening in February, we have these commitments which needs to be reminded to the political leaders so that they budget against these commitments. So this is a completely the internal national cycle of budget and how we organize the wash sector consultations and making commitments and bringing the water and sanitation and hygiene in the forefront within the budgetary cycle. But if you see on the left hand side of the slide, you would see that our National Pakistan Conference on Sanitation, PACOSAN, SWA HLM, and South Asian Conference on Sanitation, SECOSAN, were all brought in, that the commitments which we make at the provincial level would basically be announced in PACOSAN, which is a national forum. Same commitments would be announced at the SWHLM, and the same commitments will be aligned with the SECOSAN, because SECOSAN doesn't have this commitment process, but they rather have a SECOSAN declaration. So in this way, we tried that we come up with the concept of homegrown commitments, which are our own commitments, which are aligned with the SDG targets, which are budgeted later, and then those are the same commitments which, as a reminder or a peer review or to get more impetus and momentum, are later announced at the national and international and regional forums. And if you see also, there are two arrows on the left hand side of the slide. These are basically to influence the budgetary cycle using these forums again and again, that we come on the media and say that our minister has announced these commitments at SWA HLM, and we need now the minister to fight for allocation of adequate budget to live up to these commitments. So this was the conceptual framework, which was the first thing that we did in 2015. And it has taken us 3 years now to come up to this mutual accounting mechanism fully rolled out in Pakistan, and all the provincial and national joint sector reviews have been done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamran, for explaining the slide. Sitali, can you move to the next slide? Thank you. Now, as SWA has already outlined the 5 constituencies, so Government of Pakistan is also considering all these 5 constituencies, which includes government development partners, academia and research organizations, private sectors, CSOs and CBOs. Each of the constituency is mobilized to organize and develop its 2 to 3 commitments and submit it to SWA. But before submitting it to SWA, we are organizing a national level consultation in which they will be actually presenting their 2 to 3 commitments, and we will further see that how these commitments are aligned with the government commitments, because we see each other as a complementing factor to actually achieve the SWA commitment for the which are made by the government as well. So the consultation will be concluded on, consultations are already ongoing. It's not that we have not consulted, consultations are already ongoing, and in number of the processes, as Kamran has already identified, explained it to you through provincial and national GSRs, in which all these constituencies were involved in the consultation process. But now we are formally moving towards the formal consultation. So there is one consultation going on 4th of March, and on 11th of March, we will be making a final consultation with all the constituencies to conclude the commitment submission process. Now, the agreed priorities and commitments, I just wanted to give you a brief overview what kind of commitments we are going to make. That will be around the Clean Green Pakistan movement, because this is this announcement by the Prime Minister of Pakistan is actually the national vision right now for wash sector priorities and for the wash sector targets as well. So there are 5 pillars in Clean Green Pakistan. One is the tree plantation, and then there is safe drinking water, then total
I
sanitation,
think we need to
toilets,
move slides
hygiene.
also.
Yeah, Sitali, can you move the slide? Yes, he has already moved. So shall I start again? I think now the agreed commitments and priorities for the Pakistan are, as we have already explained, that it's SDG 6 baseline targets and the costing, then SACOSAN 7 declaration, which are actually which are actually complementing towards the Clean Green Pakistan movement. And now we are taking Clean Green Pakistan movement as the vision of the current government for next 5 years to actually expedite wash sector targets which are already been established in SDG 6 target settings and baseline. So I would like to explain that what this Clean Green Pakistan movement is. There are 5 pillars in Clean Green Pakistan movement. One is the tree plantation, then solid waste management. But in Pakistan, the sanitation policy also has a component on solid waste management. So our sanitation policy includes solid waste management and total sanitation, toilets and hygiene component. So these are the 2 pillars which are already identified in Prime Minister's Saaf Pakistan movement or Clean Green Pakistan movement. Then there are 2 more pillars which includes liquid waste management and then safe drinking water. So the commitments will be around these 5 pillars, which will be finalized and will be submitted to SWA by 11th of March. Now moving to next slide. Sitali, can you move to next slide? Thank you. So challenges and how they have been resolved around that, there are few points which I have identified. This includes that it's a challenge to mobilize constituencies to organize and develop commitments, but GSR process has helped us, and then WASH bottleneck exercise and then WASH sector plans have actually facilitated us to organize all the constituencies. So as Kamran has already explained, it's a three-year process which kept us going to mobilize the constituencies. Initially, it was a difficult task to take up, but adopting this process actually has facilitated us in mobilizing the constituencies. Then reaching out to all the 4 provinces, as I have already shared, that we have a larger geographical area and we have to consult and involve all the stakeholders that are in these provinces, including AJK and GB. But again, this process was facilitated when we organized provincial GSRs and glass survey consultation meetings. Thirdly, in making constituencies accountable and reporting back. This is again a challenge. This was again a challenge. But how this challenge was overcome? Initially the process was to make government commitments, but now as the process is moving forward and it is maturing and evolving from government only commitments to the partnership between all the constituencies to come and align their commitments to complement the government commitments. So, Sitali, next slide. Sitali, can you move to next slide? No, that.
This one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, this one. So the opportunities which are actually provided by the mutual accountability mechanism, I have identified 3 points only here. So it has actually strengthened the WASH sector coordination, not at national level, but at the provincial level as well. Then there is an institutional strengthening for WASH sector and the planning process. So the mutual accountability process has strengthened these areas as well. Then it has helped us to advocate the political parties to include WASH in their party manifesto. And one of the clear example is that now this government, when they have taken up, they moved to the new government system. This government has immediately announced the Clean Green Pakistan movement as per their manifesto and commitment for WASH sector. So we are actually seeing and experiencing the results which mutual accountability mechanism has placed in Pakistan. Next slide. Sitali, can you move to next slide? Thank you. If there are any question answers, myself, Niazullah Khan, and Kamran, we are available to respond.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saima. We really appreciate that presentation, and Pakistan's experience is so interesting and I think very helpful to share with our partners. There's lots to learn from Pakistan's experience. Let's just take a second to see if anyone has any questions. We'd be happy to open the mic so you could ask them directly to Dr. Saima. Does anyone want to, you could unmute yourselves as well, but we can, if you'd like to indicate in the chat that you'd like to ask a question, we could also unmute your mic as well.
Marisa, just to say, I see Bishnu and Ananda, they're typing, so I can open up their lines. Bishnu says, wonderful presentation from Pakistan team. And Ananda is typing, so I can open his line as well. Ananda, do you...
Go ahead, Sitali.
Ananda is just going to say, your line is open in case you wanted to pose your question. So he's asked, has Pakistan... Yes, has Pakistan reported for the GLAS 2018-2019 cycle?
Sitali, is this the question?
Yes, that's the question for you.
Yeah, we have completed the GLAS survey cycle. That is the 5th cycle, and we have submitted the Pakistan report to GLAS team. Okay. And the consultation took place in 2018 from July onward.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. That was Ananda saying okay, so I think that's fine. Maris, I don't think we have any more questions, and if people type and send more questions, we'll let you know.
That's great.
Just a second, Luis from the Philippines with UNICEF, she is typing. So Luis, if it's okay, we can just open up your line and you can speak.
Hi, we actually have an open plan office, so it's a little bit challenging, but just one question. And I know the work is still ongoing. Thanks. It's a really, really interesting to see your example. I was interested to understand a little bit more what kind of commitments the non-government constituencies are making. How specific or how concrete are they? And I do understand there are some consultations going to finalize, but if you could talk a little bit about the kind of commitments they've been making, it would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Luis, for highlighting this aspect. As I have already identified, there are specific the groups that are working in the constituencies, and the broader vision which I have shared so far is that the commitments will be made around clean, green Pakistan. Like the private sector, I can because I have the chance to interact with them around that, how the private sector is moving on with the commitments. For that, I would like to ask Niazullah Khan, because he is representative from private sector, so he can briefly help you out to understand what kind of commitments they are taking forward under the umbrella of Clean Green Pakistan. Niaz Sahab, if you can just highlight that aspect.
Thank you. This very interesting question is there because under the Clean Green Pakistan, we have identified different sector partners, and private sector is one. So we have engaged the Islamabad Chamber of Commerce, and later on we are planning to engage the Pakistan Chamber of Commerce. And we are sitting with them and have explained that the political vision of the government, and just the process government is looking to achieve sustainable development goals and overall arching themes of safely water and safely managed sanitation services. On the basis of that, the private sector is being encouraged to identify the opportunities where they can contribute not only externally but also internally. So our focus is that we are encouraging the private sector. As a private sector, we ourselves are encouraging our other colleagues to internalize the processes which will enable the private sector to perform much better way for achieving the sustainable development goals, especially safely managed water and sanitation services. So our engagement is that through Chamber of Commerce, which is basically an umbrella organization of the private sector in the country. Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
I think hello is Nyasa. Thank you, Nyasa, for responding on the behalf of private sector. So, hello is if there is any further, Louis, if there is any further clarity required, just let us know. So, this is just an example that how the constituencies are moving towards finalizing their commitments.
Simon, just if you allow me, we can add further on is that in Pakistan, joint sector reviews and the sector consultation, the private sector, civil society, academia were part of it. Our national joint sector review, more than 160 participants were there, and a couple of them were from the private sector.
Great.
Hello. Hello, this is Maraita from Indonesia. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for the presentations. Really inspiring. And then we also so we need some we have some short questions to explore more on your experience. So on having this commitment, multi-sectoral commitment, what is your main challenges that you faced, and then what will be your what is your key success factor? Then now you have this kind of the big achievement on this commitment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marisa. As the slide number 8 and 9, if you can just display, Sitali, the slide number 8 and 9, because that identifies the challenges, and then the slide number 9 identifies the success which we have. Thank you. So, Marisa, if you can see at the slide number 8, I have already identified that mobilizing the constituency was the biggest challenge. But as I have, and Kamran has explained, that we have gone through a 3-year process. It's not in one day that we were able to mobilize the constituencies. Mobilizing the constituencies was a difficult task, but how it was facilitated was that we adopted and initiated the GSR process and wash bottleneck exercise, in which, as Niaz Sahab has already identified, there were 160 participants, which includes all the constituencies. So initially, there was less interest, but as the GSR process evolved over a time period of 3 years, more and more constituencies were joined in for the process, and their number in each constituency, participant number in each constituency also increased. And then the provincial consultations going out to each province was again a difficult and time-consuming thing, but GSR process and glass surveys has helped us in that aspect. And then accountability and reporting back. Now, as the SWA process has evolved, and our commitment process has evolved from government-only commitment to the all constituencies commitment, and establishing a good partnership between all the constituencies, which are actually now complementing towards the government commitment and helping us to achieve the government commitment. So these are the challenging areas, challenges, and around various aspects, and then the opportunities and the success which we have achieved, that we have strengthened our WASH sector coordination, not only at national level, but at the provincial level and at the sub-provincial level as well. then there is this process has actually strengthened, made the institutional strengthening. Initially, as I have shared, that it's a federal and provincial government system. After the devolution process, there was the mandate of federal government was devolved to the province, towards the provinces for 5 to 6 years. There was no federal setup to look after the water, sanitation and hygiene sector. It was only the provincial governments. But with the SWA support and this commitment process, what we did, we identified the need of having a national wash sector unit and wash mandate within, and then the most suitable ministry was the Ministry of Climate Change, and we actually advocated to establish an institutional linkage between to be placed at federal level and then link it up to provincial level. And definitely this later on was further facilitated once the SDGs was signed by Pakistan government in 2015. So this process was further strengthened, but it's the SWA commitment that has initiated this process. And then there were many contributing factors. And then finally, which I have shared as a success factor, was that political parties were engaged and they were influenced to add water sanitation as a priority areas in their party manifesto. And now with this new government, this party manifesto has taken up actually a real-time example where the Prime Minister himself has announced the Clean Green Pakistan movement. So this is one of the biggest success so far which we have achieved through SWA commitments.
Dr. Saima, thank you so much for that response, and Marietta, thank you for that question, and thank you so much for all the questions. I'm very cognizant of the time, and this has been a really great discussion, but we want to hear from our colleagues in Vietnam. And so, Dr. Saima and colleagues from Pakistan, thank you very, very much for that presentation. If we have any further questions for Pakistan, if we could just ask that we hold them until the end, and if Dr. Saima is still available to address those questions, that'd be wonderful. Hien, are you there, and are you ready to take on the presentation?
Yeah.
Great, yeah. Thank you so much. And Hien, just before you start, let me just say to folks, I know that we are nearing the 1 hour mark, but I really would encourage you to stay and listen to the presentation from Vietnam. The presentation is going to be given by Hien, who's the WASH specialist for UNICEF in Vietnam, and so she'll be speaking about Vietnam's process with the mutual accountability mechanism as a whole, but then also we've asked her to discuss a little bit of a perspective on what it means to be an external support agency partner in the mutual accountability mechanism and the rollout in Vietnam. So would encourage you to stay for that. And so with that, Sitali, could I ask again that you help advance the presentation, and then Hien, you can just notify us when you're ready for us to move to the next slide.
Yes, I'm ready. Yes, please move to the next slide. And in order to save time, and I just go straight to the slide. Yeah, and the first one is I don't know if I use the word key milestone, but in terms of time, key time milestone back to August the 10th, 2018, UNICEF has to seek their agreement on the acceptation to implement the mutual accountability mechanism initiated by Sanitation Water for All. And then at the first meeting, we were very lucky Vietnam as one of the pioneer countries to event is the kick-off meeting organized by Sanitation Water for All Secretariat, happening in Lisbon from 13th to 15th. At that time, I was the only one representing Vietnam because the government, unluckily, because the government counterpart who already got the decision to participate in the meeting, but couldn't have enough time to get her visa. And so only me representing Vietnam. And then after that kick-off meeting on the 28th of November 2018, we had another kick-off meeting among the organized between Ministry of Construction as a focal point, Ministry for Sanitation Water for All, and Ministry of Health as a steering committee member in the Global Sanitation Water for All with UNICEF facilitation. I facilitated that meeting because I was the one who attended the kick-off meeting at the global level in Lisbon. So on the 2nd January 2019, Ministry of Construction, Ministry of Health at the General Directorate level. That's the top leader of those two main departments, implementing department of Sanitation Water for All, and UNICEF met on for the consensus of MAM plan. Because during the Lisbon meeting, I was requested to draft the MAM plan for Vietnam, and when I was back and I shared with them, and almost of the item I pick up on for the plan, those two ministries agree upon. And on the January 21st, we under the existing mechanism of the National Sanitation Working Group for rural area, we invited MOC, MOH, and MAT, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. We organized, jointly organized the first meeting with all necessary or needed partners. And then the next slide, I will talk about the result of the multi-stakeholder meeting on the 21st of 2019. Next slide, please. Please. Hello.
I have changed the slide, so now I'm on the slide that says results of the multi-stakeholder meeting.
Yes, yeah, that's the second one. Yes.
Yes, yeah. Is it the one you want, or you want the next one?
Yes, that's the one I want. That's the actually the result coming out from the first multi-stakeholder meeting on the 21st of January 2019. Then all the participating members, including Ministry of Construction, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, Women Union, and many INGOs, we agree to implement the MAM and agree to nominate Ministry of Construction as a focal point, Ministry for Sanitation Water for All for Vietnam. And then after that meeting, the Ministry of Construction has been successful to convince one vice minister to attend the sectoral ministerial meeting, minister meeting in Costa Rica. Yes, and now we are preparing for his attendance. And the selection for the commitments is still ongoing because we ask for all partners ideas about their own commitments, and then the Ministry of Construction, the focal point ministry, will review all the commitments, and together with the main other partners like MOH and Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, will decide 2 or 3 commitments to put into the MAM plan, and together all the partners will monitor and review after that. And even the discussion is ongoing, but I know for sure that the government counterparts tend to pick up the 3 commitments. One is continue with open defecation free, and the second one is the safely managed water supply, and the third one would be the coordination among all the partners, because the coordination need to be enhanced. And so also all MAM partners agree that we will meet every quarter under the existing mechanism of sanitation working group, and under the leadership of the Ministry of Construction. And we also agree the follow-up action that the first one, MOC, MOH, and MART select the 2 or 3 commitments, and then the MOC, MOH is preparing. They are preparing for the attendance of the sectoral minister meeting in Costa Rica. And the third follow-up is a detailed plan for MAM. Will be done by MOC in coordination or collaboration with MOH and MART. And then they will share the final MAM plan with all partners in the next meeting in April, maybe after the high-level sectoral meeting in Costa Rica. And then the follow-up, the important one is to implement the plan. And next slide, please. Next slide is the challenge and and solutions. And it seems that we have 4 challenges in implementing MAM. The first one is sorry, I have to come back to the my own slide, because I have a short-sighted vision and I cannot read it. The first challenge is the missing private sector in the partner list of MAM. We realized it from the first meeting on January 21st. And yes, we all agree that the MOC and MOH will look for and invite relevant partners of the private sectors into the MAM partners. And the second challenge is sanitation waterfall and MAM relatively new to many Vietnam MAM partners other than traditional one like MOH and MART. And it takes time for them to learn, and it's even new to the focal Ministry of Construction. And the solution is updates and information should be shared more often with all partners, and the coordination meeting should be organized more often than quarterly meeting, especially with the main government partners. And the third one is the government decision process made is very slow, and yes, this one solution is we need to apply a reminder mechanism. And reminding is very often done by myself, by UNICEF. And the fourth challenge is the language barrier. Because people are eager to participate, but then sometimes all the materials are in English, and so it limits their participation. And so the solution is we, like UNICEF, already translated the main documents or key documents relating to sanitation water for all, and also the key messages sent by Secretariat or even the Katarina. We translated it, but yes, it took a lot of time, and UNICEF has a very limited human capacity for that. And and before I end the presentation, the official presentation part, I just wanted to add that to tell you all that I am representing this on behalf of the government counterparts, and they allow me to be representing them to present those slides. And thank you very much for your attention. And now I just wanted to wear in my UNICEF hat and add a few more points. I mentioned in the presentation that many things or decision goes slowly from the government counterpart because their hierarchy system. It takes a lot of time for one decision from one level to another level, and so it because of the hierarchy system. And the one more challenge for UNICEF is that the MOC, the Ministry of Construction now acting as a focal ministry for sanitation water for all, they just came on board for that position, for that role. Because the new government decision 622 for the implementing the plan of action for Agenda 2030, that's a SDG. And so with that, the traditional focal point ministry was MOH. Now, because of that decision, they handed over to Ministry of Construction. And so it also takes time for the Ministry of Construction to get familiar with all sanitation water for all activities, and also MAM specifically. And the government, the third point I would like to make is the government colleagues wearing so many hats, working on various priorities, and then the prioritization for sanitation worker for all is an issue with the government counterparts. And my last point is more efforts needed in coordination across the ministries and other constituencies in Vietnam for the MUM mechanism. Thank you very much. Now it's open for questions and
Yes, thank you so much, Hien. Does anyone have questions, or Satali, can you let me know if there were any questions listed in the chat during her presentation?
Just to say, I can't see a question specifically for Vietnam. Who are the next countries to develop the mutual accountability mechanism? Okay, so there's a question from Carlos about which are the next countries to develop the mutual accountability mechanism. And then there's an interesting discussion as well going on about countries that are not partners of SWA, and specifically Philippines, which is not a partner of SWA, but they have developed, Louise, she called this they've developed a new water supply and sanitation roadmap. So it would not be too difficult to pull out specific commitments from there, but then the challenge might be getting other constituencies to make commitments before the meeting. So I think we can talk about these in general. Okay, and I see that the discussion is going on, and Virginia is responding to that. That's where we are, Marisa.
Great, thank you. Real quickly before we go to that question about the next countries rolling out the MOM, does anyone want to directly ask Hien any questions? We're happy to open the mics for you as well.
Or maybe our government counterparts who are participating in this webinar, maybe they wanted to add in.
Yes, thank you so much, Hien, and my sincere apologies for not recognizing the government counterparts. I truly apologize for that. If any of you would like to make some comments, we'd love to have them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Maybe not.
Marisa, I think for me, the only thing, it's not really a question, but just to say that I think it was interesting that in Vietnam, they also aligned with the Ministry of Construction, which I believe is coordinating the work around the SDGs. So I think this alignment was really interesting in sort of embedding with more sort of broad processes that relate to the SDGs and tracking and following up of progress in that regard. The mutual accountability mechanism is also envisaged to support countries when they there's a lot of there's a lot of background. May I just ask that people should mute their lines? Okay, so I was saying that the mutual accountability mechanism is also meant to support countries when they do their voluntary national reviews, which are linked to the high-level political forum. And so this Vietnam's experience of putting this within a ministry that's supporting that SDG-related tracking and follow-up was interesting, and hopefully we'll see also in practice how this can contribute to the voluntary national reviews. That was the addition I wanted to make.
Yeah, thank you, Sitali.
Let's see. Anything else for Hyun? I think I'm going to thank you so much, Hyun, for that presentation, for sharing Vietnam's experience. I think if there's no other questions, then maybe we'll start to move to a close. Oh, I'm sorry, Satali. The question you mentioned about the countries, the next group of countries to roll out the MOM. I'm sorry, I don't remember the precise wording that you mentioned.
Okay, so there are a few things in here, and Virginia has been responding in the chat. So there are a few things that I think we can tackle very quickly. Number one, I'm trying to find Carlos's question. Who are the next countries to develop the mutual accountability mechanism? Virginia, you might have responded to this, but I think it'll be good to respond so that everyone can hear what that process is like.
Sorry, for other countries.
Yes.
Right. So I think that I think we want to stress that the pioneer countries are countries that we have asked for us to follow and to learn from. But we know that lots of other countries are also following, are already implementing the mutual accountability mechanism, are using this opportunity to really focus some of their multi-stakeholder processes and to build on existing national processes to draw out these national priorities to be presented at the global level. So I just want to stress that it's really not only the pioneer countries that are working towards the mutual accountability mechanism. In a way, those pioneer countries just have the extra burden of having to talk to us regularly about their progress. And I know, as I already mentioned, Cambodia has already has already sent a draft country brief. I just want to stress that it's a draft country brief still, and draft commitments that are still under discussion. And I know that Benin is also making great progress on their JSR to ensure that they can present commitments. And I know that there are many other countries. So that's really what I want to stress, is that we talk about pioneer countries, but that's not the only places where there's significant movement on this issue.
Okay. Marisa, just so then there was another question about and this was in discussion also from Louise about the Philippines, because it's not yet a member of SWA, and the question about the challenge of getting other constituencies on board. So Virginia has already said there would be nothing stopping Philippines making commitments even before joining SWA, and just to say that this area of getting other constituencies is one area where we have interesting lessons from a number of countries. So the countries are trying to mobilize the constituencies in different phases. So if you already have the constituencies in place, that's great. But as we've learned, also as we heard from Pakistan last week, the universities, for example, now I think they are involved in the national process, but those universities there are not yet partners of SWA. However, they will sort of start having a conversation. So this can be done in phases in terms of bringing in the other constituencies that are not on the table, which is perhaps the first action, and then once they're on the table, also getting to move them to a point where they could very clearly demonstrate what they're putting on the table. And one other things that we've heard also from a number of actors is that it might be good to pick a champion. So it could be that maybe among the external support agencies, there's one agency that understands this well. They're willing to sort of be a pioneer in that process at country level and lead it in terms of mobilizing others and bringing them to the table to then sort of help create those constituency level discussions. So that might mean identifying a few people, a few actors that could actually play that role for the different types of actors, for civil society, for private sector, for external support agencies, as well as for research and learning agencies. We know, I think in Malawi, they've been stressing this issue since last year, that they are very keen to see how, for example, the bilateral donors could also move to a point of making commitments. And one thing we're trying to do from here is to reach out through the headquarters to see if the headquarters can mobilize, or rather can inform their country colleagues that this is something they're already a part of by virtue of being a part of SWA. So if that was useful, you could let us know depending on the national context. For the private sector constituency, for example, we also have steering committee members who try to see maybe some of their members are already present in your country and they're just not aware, and they could trigger that discussion through the existing platforms as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sitali. If there are, let's see, any other questions, let's bring them forward now. Otherwise, we'll begin to wrap up the webinar. And then we can stay on the Secretariat team members that are on the webinar could stay on the line. And if you have any general questions or logistical questions about the sector ministers meeting, we'd be happy to take them on. Let me just thank again our presenters, our colleagues from Pakistan and from Vietnam, and for Virginia's presentation on the mutual accountability mechanism, and for Sitali's comments as well and help with the chat. Thank you so much to everyone. This was a really helpful and interesting conversation. We will most certainly be talking to many of you in the coming weeks as we continue to prepare for the sector ministers meeting. I'd encourage any of you who we maybe have not had a bilateral conversation with, that we have that conversation soon. And again, if there's any questions that we can address as countries continue, or as all partners rather, prepare for the sector ministers meeting, to please bring them forward. We'd be very happy to talk them through with you. So with that, thank you. And again, we'll stay on the line if there's any further questions. Have a good day and good evening for a couple of you, but mostly a good day to everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Marisa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.